us in the virtual space. It is May 14th, and we are waiting for just a few more of our HAAB members to join us, and we will get started shortly. Thank you for your patience.
All right, puppy dog, go inside. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. We have several folks who are still being admitted into the virtual meeting room, but thank you for joining us on this beautiful Portland sunny day to talk about the important work of the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. We will begin shortly. We're just waiting for some more of these folks to be admitted into the room, and we will get started. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I see folks being admitted by the moment. So great to be in the virtual space with all of you today. Yes, if you all would go ahead and share our slide presentation. We're going to get going here in just one moment. See folks being
It's the same meeting.
Hey, John.
How you doing, young man?
Man, I'm just glad I'm not at rookie camp.
Well, you know, it show up. You know, using in the heat of the day. That first 30, it kill them. It put them down, boy. If they wasn't following the training regimen all the way to now, they got issues.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
You always know who's gonna be asked out, boy. Because I'm gonna tell you, they throwing up right now on the sideline.
So you're right.
You know, man, I don't miss it in this time of the year. I like it when the winter comes. You know, you get a reprieve a little bit, right?
Man, look, if you're not ready, it doesn't matter what time of year, it hurts.
You're right about that, doctor.
All right, we're going to give about we're right there. I think we have critical mass. Thank you again to all of you who have joined us for the Historic Albina Advisory Board meeting. Thank you for our broad community who may also be joining us on the live stream. We appreciate you taking this time with us this afternoon. Next slide. I want to remind you all this meeting is being recorded. Please make sure that you're muted when you're not speaking. HAAB members, if you have the opportunity, we would love to interact with you when it's possible to have your cameras on. If you are experiencing difficulties, there's a number there on the screen. Please avail yourself, and our technical team will assist you quickly. Next slide, please. Today, we have an exciting opportunity to dive into some of the work that the community has been requesting in regards to economic feasibility. So after we have time for our public comment, as well as project updates, we will engage with the team from Echo Northwest around economic feasibility for cover development. We will break out into 2 rooms so that we have more opportunity for engagement around the topic. We will then come back together, and there will be a report out of those breakout sessions. I want to remind all of you, this is a public meeting, and so all of our conversations, our chat, all of that will be included in our meeting record. So I just want to remind you all, the chat will also be recorded as a part of our meeting summaries. Once we report back, we will have an opportunity to hear a bit from our city partners in regards to the broader scope of activities that are happening in the Albina area. We will have an update in regards to the OTC resolution work plan, and then about moving into 30% design, which is very exciting. And then we will have our next steps and adjourn. Next slide, please. You all know these well. As a reminder to those who may be joining us on the live stream, I'm going to be looking for you all to chime in. I don't ever have that issue, but your voice matters. So I may be tapping into some of you for your wisdom and input. I always trust that you all will be authentic and genuine, helping us to advance the values of this project and holding this team accountable to the values that we have set forth. Because this is a passionate topic and we love our community, there are always going to be some misunderstandings, but we ask you to listen for understanding and to deal with issues, not with people. We have experienced a lot of discomfort in this work, but I trust that you all will remain respectfully engaged in the process, helping us to move forward. We also ask you to accept and expect that we won't solve everything today, but thank you for your commitment to the work as we move forward. Next slide, please. You all should have received a copy of the meeting agenda. It is also available on the I-5 Rose Quarter website. At this time, we're going to open up for public comment from our extended public. Speakers will have 2 minutes. I am going to turn this over to my colleague who will assist us with admittance of community members for public comment.
Thank you, Erica. Members of the public viewing the meeting on the live stream are invited to make a verbal public comment at this time. If you wish to do so, please refer to the meeting agenda. The call-in number is also shown on the slide here on the right. And call number 971-247-1195. Enter meeting ID 874-6803-9175, and then passcode 336301. You will be placed in a virtual waiting room, and when your turn to speak comes, we will invite you to unmute yourself and say your comment. As Erica mentioned, speakers will have up to 2 minutes for their comment and will be muted at time. And if you'd like to provide more extensive comments to the members of the HAAB, see the options listed on the meeting agenda. And if you're joining us on the live stream, please remember to mute your speakers to minimize feedback. And with that, I'm checking to see if we have any commenters in the queue, and we do have one. So I will go ahead and admit them into the meeting space. And Angela, if you could please stop sharing, I will go ahead and share the timer. So commenter with the phone number ending in 5424, we invite you to make comment at this time. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, for the record, Joe.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Hi, for the record, Joe Courtwright. I'm Director of City Observatory, and I'd just like to offer some comments today. And I should note that yesterday I submitted for the record an 18-page memorandum to lay out some facts about key federal programs that should be of interest to the HAAB. I want to clarify, in light of past conversations that I've had with the HAAB, that I have the greatest respect for the HAAB. I recognize that you all are the ultimate deciding body here. The purpose of public comment is really just to provide more information to you as you seek to make your decisions. And I don't have any concerns about the work that the HAAB has done. But what I will highlight is I think that there have been important omissions and misrepresentations by the Oregon Department of Transportation about your authority and responsibility, and by which I mean ODOT's authority and responsibility to mitigate the damage done by highway projects. And we know that Albina has been devastated by 3 different ODOT highway projects over a period of decades. And just to summarize that memo really quickly, there are 4 provisions of federal law that all require mitigation. There's the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which requires an identification of adverse impacts and their mitigation, including impacts on the community, not just environmental impacts, but social impacts as well. Second, there's the U.S. Department of Transportation's Environmental Justice Policy, which is separate, and it requires mitigating the cumulative negative impacts of transportation projects. So it's not just this project, but the cumulative effect of all the projects. Third, there's the U.S. Civil Rights Act, which has specific provisions that relate to transportation projects that are implemented through U.S. DOT regulations. It requires ODOT as a grantee to take affirmative steps to offset the discriminatory impacts of past projects, not just the current one. And then finally, if you look at the details behind the Reconnecting Communities program, that's a source of funds, it requires that funds not be used to widen highways, but instead it requires the funds be used to pay for community benefits and to repair the damage done by highway projects. So I hope you'll take the time to look at that 18-page memo. It's designed to help you, and I hope it's useful to you in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. And it does not appear we have any additional public comment, Erica.
Thank you so much for your assistance. Thank you, Mr. Courtwright, for your testimony today and your public comment. We appreciate your diligence and your work. Moving forward, we're going to dive back into the agenda. At this time, I'm going to invite our project director, Ms. Megan Channel, to give some project updates.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the sunny weather. I know I am. I had a couple updates just related to overall kind of project and program that I want to make sure to keep you up to date on. The first is just an acknowledgement of the visit that we had from U.S. Department of Transportation. It was back on April 30th, so not last week, but the week before. I know HAAB was invited to that, and I have to say that was such an incredible event, and I feel a little odd being the one to present on it because it was really an event for the community and so much community representation there. And so I know a couple of HAAB members were here, or that are here tonight, were there. So I'll offer a couple minutes too if there's anything that you want to report out on this event. But just as an overview, we were visited by U.S. Department of Transportation, Undersecretary Coase and Director Marion. Undersecretary Coase is the Undersecretary to U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and Director Marion She serves as the director of the Office of Secretary's Civil Rights as well. And they both co-lead all of the USDOT equity initiatives and really key partners at the federal level in our Reconnecting Communities grant that was awarded to the Albina area, including the $450 million for the Rose Quarter project and the $38 million for the City of Portland's Broadway Main Streets project. So I'll pause there, and I'm going to open it up and also do a shout out to our HAAB member, Mr. James Posey, and say a thank you for your leadership at that event as well, and representing community and HAAB during the press event too. So I'm going to pause, and for those that were at the event, if there's anything more that you want to share with your fellow HAAB members, please feel free to jump in.
Is there anyone who was there who'd like to share on the event with the Undersecretary and Director Marion? I see Mr. Keith Edwards' hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I think what really pleased me the most was the fact that our young people are really moving in a unified direction for our community, and that was what really pleased me.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a lot of synergy and collaboration happening to move the agenda of rebuilding and revitalization forward. So definitely concur.
Thanks. And I know I'm putting HAAB members totally on the spot here, but just again, since it was a community event, wanted to make sure if you had a chance to, if you wanted to say something, that you had a chance to. But again, thank you for all of your support along the way to make that grant possible and give us that moment of celebration coming together. So excited to move the project forward with y'all. Speaking of grants, I also wanted to let you know, just kind of keep you apprised of what the next steps are related to the Reconnecting Communities grant. So first step for us, as I've mentioned before, is we have to put together the grant agreement with our partners at Federal Highway Administration. So there's been 2 webinars that Federal Highway Administration hosted. We're learning sort of more information around grant process and the grant agreement. And so we're actively working with our partners there at FHWA, and those are in progress. And again, the grant agreement itself will talk about sort of the specific, it will articulate the specific scope of the dollars as articulated in the grant application, and then the timeline for those dollars. So as we have that developed, we'll be sure to be sharing that back out with the HAAB. That it'll all be consistent with what the grant application was for, with that focus on the highway cover construction. And then in order for us to, I guess, with Reconnecting Communities, as you know, we got $450 million of the broader $850 million that we asked for. Because we didn't get the full amount under Reconnecting Communities, we're actually identified as a highly recommended or a high priority project under other federal programs. And that is what instigated our application under the infra grant, for which the HAAB, I just want to say thank you for the letter of support for that grant application. But we have submitted an infra grant application that would bring in dollars to complete construction of the highway cover. So really, again, focusing on leveraging the dollars from Reconnecting Communities that would build the core portion of the cover. Infra would come and complete that construction of the cover. Also comes with some requests for the I-5 safety and operational improvements in the area sort of underneath the highway cover, constructing the southbound off-ramp flyover that was originally included in our design refinements, and then also to construct the separated bicycle and pedestrian bridge. That was one of the asks under Reconnecting Communities, but not with the lesser funding that was provided, not something that was given under Reconnecting Communities. So we're going again under infra. But just wanted to make sure that you all knew that our focus on that grant still remains completing the highway cover. And again, thanks for the letter of support there. I anticipate that we will hear back from the federal government on that one sometime in the fall. But if we get more information about timeline there, be sure to let you know. And then last but not least, and Mr. Modica, I see your hand up, so I'm going to finish here and then we can go to your question. Last but not least, just wanted to acknowledge that for the infra grant, there is a state match requirement. And so at the Oregon Transportation Commission's meeting last week on May 9th, they did approve up to the $250 million required grant matching funds for that infra grant proposal. So just wanted to make you aware that that commitment was made for those matching funds from our Transportation Commission. So with that, I will pause and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Modica?
Yes, thank you, Megan. Generalized question, the TA that you just reported out on, is that ongoing or is that TA that's already occurred? And is there any availability for HAAB to sit in and audit on those TA calls just for a deeper understanding of what's going into the grant application?
So for the Federal Highway Administration calls and the development of the grant agreement, is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Yeah. We are still figuring out with FHWA sort of what that process will look like. But I do think, similarly to how we've involved HAAB in other work related to grant applications, I think we can figure out a way to make sure that HAAB is informed and included in that process. I don't have enough details right now to know what that process is going to look like to say, here are the right points for connection, but we can make sure that there is a connection.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that. I don't know if other HAAB members have the same sense, but the requirements that need to be met, the reporting quarterly and that kind of thing, I think it would be helpful for us to at least know what we don't know, so that there's not a lot of lingering questions about what has been said and agreed to by ODOT on forming the grant app. They help us inform people as we get more FAQs about exactly what's going on. Exciting to hear that OTC has agreed to take on finding the match money for the smaller grant funding that you described. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Mr. Modica. Megan, just in case you had any final thoughts, I wanted to give you the opportunity there.
No, I'm good. I think as we continue working with FHWA, we'll figure out the right way to make sure that HAAB is included in that process.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Megan. With that, I am very excited for you all to embark on this conversation in regards to something that I believe is really important. I have heard you all mention over and over again, and that's in regards to economic feasibility for the cover development. With that, I am going to invite Cadence from Echo Northwest and her team to help lead us through this portion of our meeting.
Thank you so much, Erica. I appreciate you. Hi, everybody. My name is Cadence Petros. I work at a firm called Echo Northwest, and tonight with me is Mike Wilkerson and Sam Tedford. We'll be meeting with them in just a bit in both small group, and Mike's going to talk with you all a little bit in a minute. I wanted to start by saying this is the first of 3 touch points we're going to have with you all, and we're really excited about the opportunity to essentially make sure that as we dive into this initial pass of economic feasibility for development on the cover, that our inputs are really informed by HAAB priorities. And so we're going to have a small group discussion about one component of that this evening, afternoon, I guess. And then in June, we'll continue that conversation. And then we'll come back again in October to talk with you about some of our cost analysis findings. But if you can go to the next slide, please. First, we wanted to put this work in context. We understand that the big question is what kind of uses should be located on the cover to help create a vibrant, connected neighborhood that delivers on HAAB priorities. And so we're going to touch on some of those pieces. You've already talked about the engineering and some of the technical complications, and we know that building a cover over I-5 is a big deal. It's an exciting opportunity, but it's also super complex. And ensuring that the community benefits not just from having a reconnected community, but from what happens vertically is also a complex issue. And that's also true with regard to development and feasibility and how that works given sort of market realities about how development happens on the ground and also on covers. And so the next slide, well, it really talks about the couple smaller questions that we're going to be working with you on. And it's an iterative process, just like we're moving towards 30% design for the cover, and we'll discover some things about what can and can't happen. And then at 60% and 90%, that will be true and more things will be discovered. That same process holds with economic feasibility. What we will uncover in the next few months will set us in a direction and raise probably more questions than it will answer, but it will help advance these discussions. And so then there can be further analysis and discussion and so on until finally you get to a place where there are actual development projects with pro formas and real development can take place on the cover and adjacent. And so what we'll be talking about with you in this first phase is what are the key cost considerations and high-level costs to construct and operate buildings on the cover, and what subsidy or other investment might be needed in the short and long term. These are the kinds of questions that we want to start talking about so that we can understand what challenges are in front of us so that we can actually realize the potential of this pretty amazing opportunity. Next slide, please. So our specific scope of work is first, we're going to, in the next couple months, work with you to talk about some key development considerations so that we're all level set on what we understand to be true about some of these drivers for what makes for a development to be able to happen. We'll talk about that this evening. And then we're going to break out into small group today to talk about location priorities. Where would you want development to be focused on the cover? Sure, maybe we want development ultimately to be in all parts of the cover where it's physically possible, but where would you want to prioritize? And that will help us think about what developments we test on different parcels and also help advance the conversation about where you might want to focus first. And then we'll talk about and refine development program priorities. That means what would you want to have inside those buildings? We're basing our work on the current design and the current footprint and the current constraints. So that means 1 to 3 story buildings, and we understand mostly commercial use and or open space. And so we want to talk about, well, what does that look like? Are we talking about a cultural center or a civic use? Are we talking about private businesses? And if so, what kind? Because that will impact both the cost to build it and of course then the cost to run it and what subsidies might be necessary in order to bring these things to fruition. And then bolstered with all that information and input from you all, from what you've provided in input in the past, but also reconfirmed this month and next month, we'll go back and sharpen our pencils and build a high-level pro forma so that in October we can talk with you about what it will take to build a park, what it will take to build vertical development, whether it's 1 story, 2 or 3 story development, and what the ongoing high-level estimated operations costs might be, because it's one thing to build it, it's a whole nother thing to run it. And we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, at least at the high level, what it will take to achieve certain outcomes. So, and that will all happen in October. We'll discuss our results and make sure there's plenty of time for you all to ask questions and inform next steps. Next slide, please. And so this just shows our schedule. So we're here today at the May meeting. We're going to talk about some development considerations and then break out into small group and talk about some of your location priorities. And like I said, in June, we'll come back and talk about preferred uses, and those will really inform our pro forma. So we want to make sure that we're not just telling you what we think should be on the cover and testing that. We want to ask you for your input so that when we come back in October with the analysis results, that it's information that you think is relevant and helpful as you move forward in these discussions with ODOT and the city. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mike Wilkerson, and he's just going to walk through a couple slides to talk to you about level setting development considerations.
Thanks, Cadence. So yeah, I think, we're going to jump in here to some considerations to keep top of mind as we're considering options. I think before noting what we're going to talk about, this isn't a comprehensive analysis in the sense that there are benefits and there are costs, and we want to acknowledge that there are benefits, and we're not quantifying those and talking about all the great things that can happen here. This is just really focusing on the cost side of the equation, or through the lens of a SWOT. There are opportunities. We're talking about what are the constraints and what are the threats here, so we have those things top of mind. We aren't really delving into those types of things. We'll certainly start to do that more later, but as we jump in, I think that's an important just framing piece. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, like, the market today is very different than it was a year, 2 years ago, and they are not favorable for new construction. And that is not a unique circumstance to this location or even the city of Portland or the metro region. These are broad macro market conditions that are affecting commercial development across the country. We don't know how long that's going to last, but if we're thinking about feasibility through a lens of today, that's very challenging. We want to step back and take a broader lens of what more realistic normal market conditions might be when they resume at some point in the future. And so that's broadly speaking. And here we're adding another level of complexity, which is when you're developing on a cover, that is different than when you're developing on solid land where you can excavate, et cetera, connect to utilities in a different way. So we want to understand broadly there are constraints in the market, and in this specific site, there are opportunities that we have to work within. And so what that means is almost certainly we will require subsidy that are either public, philanthropic, or public-private partnerships that help support the cost of construction, not including the cost of land, but also as we get into operating support, we understand cultural, nonprofit, and other uses are likely going to need operating support as well, which is to say the ability to pay rent for those types of organizations may not support the cost of operations. We want to understand what that looks like as we discuss those programmed uses, not necessarily the buildings themselves that are going to be built to house those uses. Next slide, please. So I think as we focus on vertical development today, really what we're understanding is that vertical development. So as you build above ground, you also need streets, right? You need utility access, and you need adjacent open spaces. And so it's not just the vertical themselves. You have to understand what type of building is it and what are those supporting infrastructure that you need. And we think about that as the horizontal uses. And so understanding that is different on cover than it is off cover. Off cover, we already have those infrastructure adjacent pieces there. I think the hard part is oftentimes there's this assumption that, well, development occurs in a market context because it's profitable. And if we took that profit from the off cover, could that help cross subsidize or help support the cost of building on cover? I think the challenge here, and we'll see this more when we get into this, is the sizes of the parcels are pretty atypical and irregular, which is to say development likes to generally occur in squares and rectangles, and the city grid in the city of Portland is set up in squares. And you look at these sites, they're not squares. And so the square footage of them, while it can be useful, is not necessarily what you would think of as optimal for designing profitable projects. Further, it's constrained by the fact that they're smaller parcels and the amount of density you can build on them is small. And so in some instances, while it may be true that you could think about cross-subsidization happening, I think that's less likely to be the case here because of those circumstances. I think the last couple of points is really just the timing of the vertical development is critical, right? When you're building off cover, infrastructure, et cetera, those types of considerations are something you can build at the time of construction. And so as you're adapting or value engineering or changing your plans, you have flexibility to do that. On cover, you do not have that flexibility. And so building concurrently along with construction is very different than assuming what you think you want to build later and then understanding how locked in are you based on those choices. And so what that means is effectively the interim use is very important, because as you put in those improvements in the short run, they may be more like longer term uses rather than something that is going to be developed on in the short run. And so understanding that those improvements and the condition of those improvements is critical, because that's not going to be the full build out in year 1 or year 2 or probably even year 10. Understanding what that looks like over a longer time horizon is very important. And next slide, please. And that is the end of my section.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next section, I want to pause for a minute and see if anybody has any questions for Mike about some of the points that he raised. And I'll just echo what he said. There are so many pretty amazing opportunities that the cover provides, both just by reconnecting the street grid in the neighborhood, but also for the potential for vertical development. What we wanted to make sure is that we also discuss some of the challenges and complexities of doing that and achieving that reality, so that we can raise those conversations and help inform what happens next. Yes, Mr. Edwards.
I think it's imperative that we utilize a new way of thinking about construction, a new way of thinking about development. The reason I say that is because I saw something just recently happen with the city, spending $13 to $17 million trying to make a 4-pound bag, 12-pound bag out of a 4-pound bag. I'm talking about City Hall. So, but that's conventional thinking that created that. So we have to think differently about this project and think outside the box, so that it is something that will be in development perhaps for quite some time. But it's going to be a progression, not something that we build up and then we tear it down, we build up and tear it down. It has to be something that's thought in a progressive way. And that's going to require thinking, like I say, that doesn't mean that we have to use necessarily innovative ways of construction, but it might. And I think that's the important piece, because if we're going to do this, this is something new. This has to be something creative, and it has to be something that's respectful of the community. And in doing that, it has to be something that is not done in the traditional way, because tradition has harmed our community for too many years. And we're not going to go down that road again. So let's talk about that as we go forward, about being creative and how we make this happen, and new and creative ways of thinking, not saying, oh, we can't do that, or we can't do this, or no, that's not going to work. Let's make it work. And let's be positive about what we're doing here for our community.
Thank you for saying that. And what will it take to make it work? And how do we find those solutions? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mr. Washington?
Mr. Edwards, your last part, if you didn't say no more after the last 5 sentences, I would have been able to say what I was thinking, but I think it was right along the same line, man. I'm a little bit suspect at times when people give me caution in the beginning of a process that requires some enthusiasm, some desire, some dreaming, all of that stuff. And when someone comes and they say, hey, but there's potential for a problem, so let us let you know now. So I was just curious as to why you would introduce perhaps our handicaps to us along the way, until we got to them. So was there a reason behind that, or is it just allowing us to not dream too far?
Oh, I am a big fan of big dreams. I think I'm hopeful. The reason we wanted to talk to you about these challenges isn't to dim the dreaming, it's actually to galvanize the action to move forward to implementation. And so some of those pieces are, if we can see that there are some complexities or challenges in the road ahead, we just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, that those challenges are there. It's not to stop, it's to actually navigate around them. And as Mr. Edwards said, like, find creative ways of hurdling over them. The fear, I guess, was that if we don't start to really talk about some of those challenges, that we might turn a corner and smack right into them and not be prepared to overcome them.
You know, most of us on this committee is probably over 50. And we are aware that around every corner there's a challenge, you know, and that potential for what's there is there. But let us get on the road and let's get to going to where we're going. And then when the challenges come, we'll deal with them then. But for right now, let's get to where we're going. That's just my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr.
But I appreciate y'all, you know, letting us know there's a boogeyman in the forest out there, you know, and we need to be aware of that. I appreciate that.
Mr. Posey. Oh, are you on mute?
Mr. Posey, we see your hand. We don't want to move forward if you had a comment or.
He's just having challenges.
And we could always come back, Cadence. So, yeah.
That's great. And there's, oh,
Can you hear me okay?
now we can. Yes, thank
Now,
you.
yes.
I apologize. Yeah, I'm one of those over 50 people John's talking about. I'm just curious to know, I was very excited to hear Eco Northwest was going to be making a presentation at this meeting. And I was just curious to know, in the broader context, whether or not, you know, we're focused on these caps and this $450 million that have come essentially for the caps, whether or not there's any nexus between, you know, how you guys are going to lay out this project and the economic opportunities and what you all have done around the other work you've done at Eco Northwest, i.e. The disparity studies that you all have been focused on. You see these huge gaps in ownership, business capacity, et cetera, in the African-American community, and whether or not there's any collaboration or concerns or ways in which you're going to use this project to close those huge economic gaps that I think you all have found in previous studies that you've done, economic forecasting that you've done, and or is there any thought to that? You know, I'll stop there, but it seems to me if you're talking in terms of opportunity, this particular project would be designed to help close those huge disparities in home ownership, business ownership, et cetera, et cetera. I'll stop there and maybe you all can give me some answers on that.
Sure, I'll start, and then maybe Mike, you can chime in also if you have additional thoughts. I guess the way I would frame it, Mr. Posey, is we actually don't want to predetermine or decide what this project is going to do or study, and that's actually why we're here talking with you. So sure, I mean, we've done lots of different work around the city, and we know what potential is available in this community for folks to actualize their hopes and dreams. But we really are here to hear what your thoughts are and to test those potential uses that you think are going to move the community forward in important ways. So we are eager to help with that because we think this project is an opportunity to make really big advancement. But I don't think we're here to insert our thoughts on what that should be.
Well, let me just kind of respond to that real quickly, and that is to say, having previous conversations with Megan and everybody at ODOT. By the way, who's paying you guys? Is ODOT paying y'all, or where y'all getting y'all money from? ODOT?
ODOT is paying.
Okay, cool. I just wanted, just be real clear about it. But the bottom line is, I've talked to Megan about having the economists look at the real benefits, pennies and cents, dollars, everything that will go into changing the horrendous economic disparity in the African American community. I'm not on this HAAB just to be playing tiddlywinks to see how much you all can talk about how great y'all are and what y'all can do in terms of building this thing and how cute it is. I'm angry at the economic disparity of African Americans in this community. I want to see this project be used to change that ugly picture. And for you all to come on here and talk about this in the abstract, to me, it's insulting because you all know this. Y'all know that you can run the numbers. You can tell us what the probabilities are about changing this ugly picture. So, I mean, I don't want to get too far off base here, but we need to have some real numbers about how this project is going to benefit our community in a material way. I asked for NACE codes. How many businesses going to be created as a result of this project? What time? We're talking about the covers, but I'm interested in. We ain't even got the highway yet. Isn't the covers going to come over the highway, or we got to? I mean, I'm a little confused here. Y'all explain that to me because I'm a little baffled by this.
Well, I guess what I can say is we're taking one step forward, and it is probably not going to answer all the questions that you have and that you should be asking, but it's a step in what we think at least is the right direction, where we can start to talk about what the development possibilities might be for certain uses and what the high level costs to make them happen look like, what workforce opportunities, what wealth creation opportunities, what construction contracts or other ways of creating wealth might result are absolutely critical questions that need to continue to be asked and resolved as the project moves forward. And I guess we're hopeful that by beginning the process of talking about what might be built on the cover, we'll start to at least create a foundation for future conversations to keep going.
All right. I mean, of course, obviously that's not going to satisfy me because I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not seeing any real dollars. You all know that, Black people don't have no jobs to speak up. Relative, we have the highest unemployment rate. We have the highest absence of home ownership. You all know we have the least amount of business associated with the building of highways. For years, white people have benefited from these highways. Years and years, they've got out in front. They have a head start. We can't catch up. And I was looking for Eco Northwest to tell us the story. How do we change that? How do we get to parity and equity using this highway process to do it? And you all are not giving me the information. You're talking about at a high level. I want to go to the low level. How many jobs are going to be created? How many construction companies can we build that look like with African Americans in the head of them? How many architectural firms are we going to build? How many real estate developers are we going to have as a result of this project? Those are the kind of questions I want to know about and can sign on to. I can't think theoretically about this project in any visionary way without me knowing those numbers, because that's what's at the heart of this, is trying to get our community healed and to be in a position where we can say, as a result of this project, all the damage that has occurred to us, this will help heal some of that damage and pain. Y'all don't get it, I don't think. Maybe I'm off base, but I'm not there yet.
Mr. Posey, I see that maybe Lisa as well as Megan had some thoughts in response.
Hey, Megan, maybe I'll jump in on the piece that could be Mr. Posey, thank you for that feedback. It's consistent with what you have shared with us elsewhere. So and I think a part of it could be looked at as part of ECHO's analysis of what kind of opportunities are there for property ownership, for development, what's the value of that development. I think you're asking a broader question about what kind of job opportunities exist tied to the construction project too. And that's the part that I would hand over to ODOT to answer about what level of economic impact analysis do they do when they're looking at the highway project itself versus the development that could happen on the lids. And then hopefully we could take A plus B, and that gets you some of the way there to your question.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, I was hoping that Prosper Portland would come to the table. You guys would have an integrated conversation of how we change this condition in our community. We're not doing this cover just because they look pretty. We're doing it to try to build something in our community. You guys are not giving us, you know, y'all run the numbers better than anybody. I wish I was an economist. I could weigh in on this and really do the math, but I can't. I don't have that background. That's not my experience. That's why I was excited to see you all come to the table with a more emphatic way in which we can change this condition in our community. And you're not talking to Prosper Portland. I'm not seeing ODOT making any presentation about this. PDOT, everybody seems to be way out there. Get to the real nuts and bolts of where we're trying to go with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. I see several hands. I want to make sure that we can get to you because I know that what you have to say is important. I'm going to go with Mr. Edwards first and then to Miss Leslie.
Thank you. I think, you know, the community being led by my brother, the president of NAACP, you know, I think what he's trying to say, and well, I'm not even going to try to interpret that. I'm going to tell you what I think. And what I think is that we need projections, not only on what opportunities, and I don't like jobs. I hate that language. I'm talking about career opportunities, because I've only had one career. I've had a whole bunch of jobs. So I'm talking about career opportunities for our folks. And so, but what is that going to look like at the end of the day? You know, there should be, you know, like James said, there's economists that can not only project, but predict what that's going to look like. We don't need, you know, a lot of fluff and balloons and confetti saying that, oh, we're gonna create 100 new Black businesses. We want to be realistic about that. We want to know, yeah, maybe there's an opportunity for 100, but realistically, we're only going to end up with 8. You know, listen, we want something that's real and it's tangible, so we know where we're going and how we're going to get there. I think that's the important piece of this. And I get it. Yeah, this is a highway cover and this is ODOT, but we're here and this is our community. And we want to make sure at the end of the day that we have Black businesses, we have Black housing, we have a whole lot of things. We have some history. We have all of that in our community that's going to say, okay, now we're making some progress. Now we're moving forward.
Thank you.
And that's something that can't be misdiagnosed.
Indeed. Can I offer, we have to get to those steps as well. I think that's what Cadence is trying to help us get to. So Miss Leslie, I said we would go with you next. And Megan, I see your hand as well as Mr. Washington.
Hey, there's just a couple things. I wasn't going to say anything, but you know, my major concern, and I know again that we're talking about covers and construction, but we've spent the last almost 10 years advocating for funding for housing for people to have the opportunity to move back into Northeast Portland, primarily Black and brown people. And at this point, Black folks can't even afford a 60% rent because the economics for Black families has continued to be suppressed. And that, you know, if that doesn't change, all of this work that has gone into this for the last 10 years and another 300 units that are being built will be for naught because Black people can't afford them. And that's my greatest worry, is that we've done all of this work and build all these beautiful buildings, and another 5 years or 3 years or whatever, and they'll be priced out of even 60% units. So we've got to figure out a way to increase the incomes and increase the economics so that Black people can afford even what's being built that's affordable, or that somebody can buy a house with $150,000 worth of down payment and people still can't find a house. So, you know, again, that's an ancillary, but it's connected. Several folks have talked about housing. We're, you know, building stuff as fast as it can be built. But if people can't afford it, it doesn't make any difference. Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it, Ms. Leslie. I'm going to give us just a few more minutes before we move forward. Mr. Washington and then Megan.
You know, I appreciate James being the one to throw this rock this time, because at times it sounds like as if when we start this conversation, it begins to sound like the individual is selfish and they're just seeking their own concerns and all these kinds of things. But I think it's across the board, even what Leslie said. And the realization is the difference between if we're going to develop a community economically in terms of all the initiatives we talk about, prosperity, the raising income means, and all those types of things. Small business is 85% of our state. But yet at the same time, we're still not talking necessarily about the development of how we're going to move that needle along the way. And even though that Prosper is involved, that conversation seems to never come about, and that's Prosper's bailiwick. I mean, that's where they're supposed to be. But at the same time, I think the risk is that these conversations tend to always talk about erecting these glorious monuments, you know, these nice buildings, or who's going to build this, but then it doesn't look at how the overall economic strategy to develop the community itself on the overall aspect of it is really talked about. We talk about buildings, we talk about who's going to own the buildings, blah, blah, blah. So I think that when we start disseminating this information in such a way to where it just doesn't necessarily have to go to the micro aspect of things, but just really give the community some hope as to how they can participate with the opportunities here, and not just in some limited category. We know that the blight is across the boundary, is across the whole demographic in all kinds of ways. So I just agree we need to be really creative and assertive in terms of how we look at how we're going to build the bigger picture, how we're going to have the community uplift itself and through this opportunity, and be uplifted through it, not just in one category, but across the board.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Megan, and then we'll move forward after you.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge really the role that COAC, or Community Opportunity Advisory Committee, has played in helping us understand, I'd say, half of the picture or part of the picture. And Mr. Posey, you know, you've been a strong leader on that body, but wanted to acknowledge, you know, the diversity and subcontracting plan that was developed by our contractor, our CMGC contractor, specifically Raymore Construction, in partnership with the COAC, you know, that drilled in on how do we set intentional targets for, you know, who is building this project. And I recognize that that's, again, half of the story, but, you know, how do we maximize opportunities for disadvantaged business enterprises? The work that we've done shows that we're going to have an estimated value of, you know, $95 million going towards DBEs. We're also looking at the workforce goals and what we know as part of building the project, really what ODOT and the project can have a direct benefit on, is that's creating, you know, 2 million labor hours. That's, you know, up to 150 million in payroll and benefits. We have some more data and information from COAC and this diversity and subcontracting plan that we can share back out with HAAB so that you can see that. Totally understanding that the second part of the question is, well, once the project is built, once we've achieved these goals, then what? And I think that's a conversation that Cadence with her team at Echo Northwest, in partnership with the city and sort of broader efforts that are happening, that we still have to answer. And Mr. Washington, to your point, like what are those opportunities that we're creating, and then how can the community kind of partner with us as those go forward. So just wanted to acknowledge that at least for the direct impact that the project can have, we do have some goals and economic elements laid out there that I can make sure that we're following up with again. So Eric, I'll turn it back to you, knowing we are running short on time.
Thanks. Yes. We are going to, thank you. The conversation is always necessary. Every passion point and input is important to help us move this dialogue and move the project forward. We may have to pivot just a little bit. So Cadence, let's think maybe about not breaking out and continuing a little bit along the line, and let's see where we are, and I'll help us monitor our time.
Yeah, so we're thinking on the fly now, right? And so what we had wanted to do was dive into a discussion with you all about where you might want to focus development. And where I'm struggling is it sort of flies in the face of what you all have been talking about for the next several minutes. So we could proceed with that conversation about locational priorities, about where you might want to have development happen on the cover. Or we could continue this conversation we've been having now to talk about some possibilities of how economic opportunity could be tied to different developments that you might see on the cover, right? So for example, if we wanted to build a two-story commercial building and put for-profit and nonprofit businesses in there, what kind of jobs might relate or result from that? That could be a way we could pivot our scope. It's not what we are contracted to do now, but it is work that we have done before. And so I guess I am open to the group's consensus on how you would like to proceed. If we want to talk about locational priorities, understanding that we can go back and talk with ODOT and the city team about some potential changes to our scope, or we could, if you feel like there's more to say now about your priorities for how you would like us to be helpful, we can continue that conversation.
Mr. Washington, I do see your hand, and I do see Mr. Posey's pan. Might I offer, and forgive me if this is priorities for development on the cover will help us determine what the economic impact could be. So if we don't know yet whether it's a blank canvas or whether or not where potential development can happen, it seems we need to move in that direction in order to then be able to say, now, based on these priorities, this is the economic benefit.
Yeah.
I'm in
Mr.
agreement
Washington,
with that.
yes.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm saying. We if we don't know what we can build, where we can build it, then we don't really have a discussion. I mean, now this is just an open slate on a park, but if there are some strategic principles we need to know about in terms of where buildings can be placed and what can be placed on, so that information we need to understand before, as a foundation, before we can unpack that. So I'm up for that. I get it.
Lisa?
Okay.
I think James was before, Mr. Posey was before me. So I'm gonna.
My apologies, Mr.
No, that's
Posey.
okay.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. But hey, so, I'm sitting over here in the Lloyd Center, and you all know where the Lloyd Center, and you see, I'm sitting over here in the Lloyd Center Mall, built, I don't know how many years ago. And the folk who do the economic forecasting could have predicted based upon what the market will do and what the economist has said about the future of retail, et cetera, et cetera. And the point is that most of us don't know what the future looks like, what it's going to be. And I was hopeful that Eco Northwest, Prosper Portland could do the study, could do a projection, as Keith was talking about, what would be most feasible in terms of what should go on top of this cap? What is the long-term benefit of those caps and how it would generate wealth for the Black community in the long haul. And that will go a long way toward me agreeing to or having some confidence in that we're not doing this all for naught. And
Thank you.
so I was hopeful that the people who are in the business of projecting retail markets, wholesale, home ownership, housing, and all of that combined could give us a scenario that we could talk about how these caps should look and over the long haul will benefit our community that's hurting. We don't want to be sitting here 50 years from now having a cap and nobody's on top of it except for mice.
Yeah.
If you all
Mr.
feel what I'm
Posey,
saying.
thank you. I would offer that the team does not want to be seen as baiting or pushing the community in one direction. And thus the conversation with what is the HAAB's priorities prior to them making that evaluation in regards to that. So Cadence and JT, I see your hand as well as Lisa. I'm gonna have us move forward into our agenda and let's see if we can come to the place where we can get to those evaluations that we're talking about.
Okay. So I think the good news is it may not sound like it, but I think we're actually pretty much on the same page. It's just that we're taking a couple baby steps, and I hear you loud and clear that how that translates to wealth creation, jobs, and careers is a really key component of that. And so I guess what we'll do is we'll just go through the next couple slides and then circle back with ODOT to talk about what else we could do to augment our scope. So next slide, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I could say something here. We've got some people that have not spoken yet. And if it takes a little bit longer for us to have this meeting today, to extend it, I think we need to be real clear about making sure the voices are heard. And so I think we need to recognize folks that have something to say, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
If we could,
who did we miss, Mr. Edwards?
JT.
I saw JT, and you said someone else that had their hand up.
Lisa did have her hand up. I appreciate you all. I want you to know that there are all kinds of conversations happening. I am paying attention to the room and communicating with people. So I'm never going to not allow people to speak, but I appreciate your concern for the other folks in the room. And so I will honor you as my elder here, Mr. Edwards. JT, if you'd like to speak here.
Thank you.
Feel free.
Oh yeah, I can be quick on this end, and I appreciate you, Mr. Edwards. I was just gonna say, I think Erica, you did exactly what I was thinking was appropriate. You know, we don't have all the answers to Mr. Posey's question because we don't know what's gonna be built atop the cover. I think functionally, a big part of our job as an advisory body is to make sure that the cap is constructed in a way that can support a variety of development scenarios, and then to offer guidance as we move through the design process to ensure that those development scenarios, the possibilities that will ultimately be left to the hands of, an intersection of the community and whoever ends up developing the cap itself are aligned with the best interests of the community. But I think sometimes it feels like we're putting the cart a little bit before the horse here. Yeah, so happy to keep learning about some of the scenarios that Echo and everybody else came up with, and also grateful for everybody's input on this. Yeah, that was all I had on this here.
Thank you, JT.
All right. Erica, can you let me know how much time we have for the rest of this agenda item?
Indeed. I say we likely need to move forward in about we can give 15 minutes here.
Oh, that will be plenty. We probably don't need that much, depending on what everybody has to say about the slides. So I'll do my part pretty quickly so that we leave plenty of time for y'all to talk. This first slide is really just to make obvious what is already clear, which is the cover doesn't exist in isolation. It is part of a larger community. And so as we're thinking about where you might want to prioritize first phase development, you might think about how that relates to other projects and other activities and connections to different parts of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And these are pictures you've seen before about the cover, so they should be very familiar. But what we are studying is the current design. So it's 10 on-cover parcels that you can see there in orange, and 5 remnant parcels that are off-cover in purple. And so our analysis at this point, we've proposed that we focus really on the on-cover parcels, because that's where I think most of the sort of ambiguity about cost and cost implications live. But that's also up for some conversation. Next slide, please. And as you've heard from the engineers in the room, not all on-cover parcels are the same. And here you can see that the ones in orange are able to withstand a higher load, and therefore can hold taller buildings, while the teal really are constructed for at most 1-story development. And so we'll be thinking about those considerations, because those are just real constraints that exist given the current design. And so that's what we'll be working within as we move forward with our phase 1 analysis. Next. And so here I think you've seen this slide also before, and it's called full build out, but it essentially shows some significant development on cover as well as the off cover parcels. And like Mike said, development likes regular squares and rectangles, and we've got some L shapes here as well. And it shows just the different possibilities. And our scope of work anticipates that we'll put something on every parcel. So for example, 2A, we're showing as open space. Does that make sense to you all? Because it's one of those teal parcels. Would you rather see a building there, a 1-story building? And so what we want to talk with you about is next slide. And these next slides are where you might cluster first phase development. Does it make sense to cluster around Hancock, or next slide? Or maybe around Broadway? Next slide. Or would you rather see it dispersed? Now, none of these are something we're proposing must be so. It's just was really to stimulate conversation and breakout, and I guess now in full group, to talk about, when you think about first phase development, where do you think it's important to locate? And then the next slide has some specific questions that we were going to ask, and that I think what we'll do is just open up for discussion. Where would you want development to focus first? Where is it most needed? If you were going to kind of have a cover built and see something go up vertically shortly thereafter, where would you want that first big moment to be? Should it focus in one area in a concentration, or to be dispersed? And then what are other key locational questions that you'd like to be considered as we are doing this first pass? None of it is obviously being set in stone. It's really just geared to help us provide inputs to our analysis to provide back to you in October. And I guess the last question I'll add is, are there some parcels on cover that you think just really should be open space? I think that's sort of the alternative question we would like for you to help us inform. And I see.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Srinivasa?
Yeah, thank you for asking these questions. I appreciate them. And I think what I'd like to do is propose a different approach to thinking of the development priorities. As I see this list, kind of the underlying piece is the location, the where. But I think instead of thinking about it that way, I think I'd like to suggest that we approach it from what are the community's first needs? What's going to be short term to build versus long term? Where do we have synergy of partnerships that can support moving forward on projects versus conversations that need to start and may take longer? So I think we need to kind of approach it from a few different buckets instead of being land-based and the functionality of where they go. It should be more relational and based on the community needs as a priority.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And I'll just offer that June is, we were hoping to have that discussion. And so maybe we got order of operations incorrect and should have started with the what instead of the where. I hear that.
Bryson, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to support that because my thought was, with some of these locations, what we were aiming to build would dictate where we want to go. If we were trying to focus on building housing, for instance, building right by the on-ramp would probably be the key spot.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And based on sort of the previous work to date, we're assuming that none of the parcels contain housing on cover, that off cover, the adjacent parcels would be housing appropriate, but not on cover. That was one of the sort of given assumptions for our work.
I see some alignment in the chat. Other comments around needs, what's appropriate, and where? Mr. Washington.
The parts where you come off and on the on-ramp and where you can build the single-story buildings at it, I really think that there should be information centers and, small business hubs, stuff like that, where transient, where people are moving to and fro, that they can get information about the district and the community and stuff like that. So not so much a direct use of buildings that are a direct use, but to have some usage that could really assist in that types of things. Maybe house a small business or two there, but primarily information centers and stuff like that.
Thank you.
And then, of course, the last part would be in terms of the larger building. I think sometimes the larger building would probably be a real smart thing to start with in the center of the cover so that, we know what the weight is, know how much distribution can go as far as, the other parts. Maybe that bigger building might suck up a space somewhere else. So we can get a bigger building in the center and if we can get activated on that, it has a multiple usage, then maybe we would gain a whole lot more in the beginning than waiting to get to that place. So my vote is to look at the center and build the biggest building first.
Thank you.
Mr. Posey?
Yeah, so of course, my vote is to, again, the what and who. Again, I'm centered around the what and who these parcels need to belong to and who ultimately will have ownership. Because at the end of the day, we recognize those who have the goal make the rules. And for many years, the planners, and I'm speaking metaphorically about people who have worked in the interest of everybody except the Black community to gentrify our community and put us in the position that we are right now. And again, it's people like Eco Northwest and the planners and so forth who didn't have us in mind in terms of the long-term prosperity of our community that needs to sort of reverse that, rethink that, and talk about the gaps and disparities in our community. For example, we know that the medical industry is going to be prominent throughout the next, umpteen years. And why aren't we talking about a medical institution
Did we lose you, Mr. Posey? Mr. Posey? You might be having some connection challenges there. We'll allow him to finish his thought once we can get the technical issues worked out. Other thoughts from HAAB members around the what?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Modica.
So I been participating with some great active listening today. I am fully on board with what Mr. J.T. Flowers said. And as such, you know, Echo Northwest is kind of navigating the ship right now towards the North Star of a project that is not going to be completed in one fell swoop, right? I mean, so I think it's realistic to understand that even as the highway portion is completed, there will be so much more work to be done. For instance, where Tubman School ends up is still in a holding pattern. And as well, I heard mention of housing and the covers. I don't think anyone wants to live on top of the caps, but again, the adjacent land. And I would just suggest, and Echo Northwest is listening, because I heard the mention of nonprofits. I get it, I understand it, but my concern always is that we do not look at forward progress from a poverty-centric lens. And so we're talking about businesses. And we know with regard to businesses, you know, the failure ratio is very high for any business. But as long as when we reach the shore, that the opportunity still exists. So then that means, again, what type of structure? Is it structures that could be multi-use? And, you know, I heard what Mr. Posey and Mr. Washington said, but, you know, the business forecast, I mean, how do you look past 60 months or 120 months, 10 years? There's so many different factors that will impact availability of space and use and what the market wants, you know, which will be on the agenda of those that want to open businesses or incubate business opportunity. And so much business is electronic now. Is it really safe to assume that brick and mortar will be outside of some needed services and opportunities? Will brick and mortar be what people are going to be attracted to? So I just wanted to say those few things.
Thank you, Mr. Modica. Mr. Campbell, I see your hand.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for sharing. I know it's, as I was reviewing the PowerPoint and the different scenarios, it was just it's nice to see the full built out scenario to try to get a view of kind of like how things are. I was just thinking though, just more about like I know we're on the what part, but it's just more, I'm always considering on the how, the approach of getting the community involvement in. I know there's been plenty of HAAB members that repeatedly wants to just more voices on these plans. And it's good that we see these scenarios, but it's like, when can we take these scenarios and then share it to community members and then get their input? I'm just trying to make sure that a lot of these plans for the future is community led and community involved. So that's just something just to continue to
Right.
sure and keep in mind. So
Andrew, it sounds like you're, talking about what is the broader community engagement strategy around the potential, et cetera. I don't want to speak to it. I know that there is the collaboration with the city and with the team at Prosper and ODOT and ABT, thinking about how do we engage the community more broadly. So there definitely is that component that needs to happen, should happen, and it's my understanding will happen.
okay. That's if it will happen, I hope it do happen. I know we've been projecting it within the timeline. I see it in the project timeline and a few slides ahead. But after the past few years, it only been about a few opportunities where the community really gave input on certain designs. And since they're now we're about 30% getting into the design piece, it's just good to continue to keep that going and to continue to use the HAAB network, because there's a lot of rich network here and a lot of people do certain events that can bridge that. So I'm just echoing that part in a very intentional manner, but I know it takes time to and budget wise too, but not going to get into all that. I just wanted to just echo that. And sorry if I started the more hands raised. I see Mr.
No, that's okay. That's what this space is for. No worries. Thank you so much. This is the order in which I saw the hands: Mr. Edwards, Mr. Posey, and then Mr. Washington.
Thank you. I just want to keep mine real brief. I would like to see some type of model or template along the lines of what OPEC was. I don't know the history of that, but at the end of the day, our community would own any private land and property and buildings that would be around there.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Posey?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to kind of keep it simple. I think many of the problems that we face in our community is tied to our lack of economic capacity. And you guys, y'all have to get past me on this, but at the end of the day, if we ain't got no money, we're in trouble, y'all. And so my agenda is real simple. We need to put some money, some economic capacity in the hands of Black people so they can run this race. Because whether we know it or not, we're in a competitive situation with everybody else around us, and we're not doing too well. And so when we have a project like this, and we can be very specific about how we use this project to make up for the past harm and danger that's occurred. Give you an example. Joe Cartwright's on here talking about ecological stuff. And I'm with some other people who say, where was he when they was building all this stuff and they took all this money and gentrified our community with all that money they took to widen them highways in the past. We can speak to that now. We can change that. We can maybe reverse a little of that. We're so far behind. Whatever we do, we're gonna need all hands on deck trying to refocus money into the hands of Black people. And I'm serious about that. And I don't have to be an economist. I just know I can do a little math. They didn't teach me very much math, but at the end of the day, we broke, y'all. Thank you.
We appreciate your passion, Mr. Posey, and we know you'll hold us to it. I say Mr. Washington's hand and then Joy.
This gets me kind of frustrated because I remember something JT said a while back in one of our other meetings when there's a process meeting when we start talking about social justice in the midst of technical conversations. It's a really difficult marriage to bring them in the same space and have the conversation. I mean, there are some technical things we need to get to, to be able to get to some of these other conversations around social justice. And so but I understand what James is saying. I mean, but how do we start out as a foundational understanding that, hey, look, we understand that we need to make sure that we look at some of the economic justice issues that we are facing and make sure that they're a priority. I mean, after all, we're putting everybody else to work, but we're not getting to work, right? But yet we discussing, and historically, it's always been that our community is always in discussion about the work while everybody else is working, and we don't get no opportunity to share in the economics of those jobs that we're talking about most of the time. So I get it, but I also get the part that understanding that for those people who are technical in consciousness in their minds here right now, is that we got to get through some of this technical stuff to be able to uncover what opportunities are there. And then as far as what my boy Madiq was talking about businesses, I mean, with the amount of space that is available there on this cover, it would be ludicrous to believe that we can't figure out how to get get the business forecast or whatever that is in some of that space. Because after all, ain't nobody gonna be living on it. So we got to figure out what we're gonna do on it. What we're gonna put a grocery store on it? What are we gonna do? You know, in that reality. So what's available to be able to do that? So I think some of this technical conversation we need to get through. But I'm always cognizant of the fact of the simplest aspect of this, and that's what James is saying, is how is the simple man or the simple business or the simple person who is not necessarily privy to the 30th floor realities of some of these things, how do they get access to some opportunity here? And so that's what I'm constantly listening for, but I'm also listening for the technical aspect of how this thing is going to get done and what we're going to need to do to get it done.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Joy?
Thank you so much. I want to just say some appreciation for facilitating this meeting. Thank you, Erica. But I wanted to quickly uplift what Andrew mentioned and really make a clear call for a step beyond the typical traditional community engagement. We really need to go beyond that and really think about what it looks like to share power with folks. I've taught for over 5 years collaborative design at PNCA around the built environment. And I think the way that I've seen most of our government agencies do community engagement is really disrespectful on quite a lot of levels. So I just want to throw out that there are other models out there that go beyond the traditional community engagement approach. And then I also want to just make a quick note that I think it's really important for us to look at alternatives to economic development that's not just only centered on businesses. I know there is many different models out there. I think the Community Investors Trust is one of them that I know. I think Mercy Corp used to do. I don't know if they're still doing, but I would love to see other models, knowing particularly that the state of commercial leases, for example, or just commercial spaces have changed so drastically over the last 4 years. And I predict will continue to change as we are, like mentioned before, moving to more digital spaces. More people want to work remotely. I think there's really an opportunity here to be a little bit more forward thinking and not only centered businesses as a means of economic growth for our community. And yeah, that's basically what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your thoughtful input and response. What I think is we have a lot of work yet to do. Thank you. I know we didn't likely get to everything, Cadence, but we'll spend some time thinking about how we help get to that next piece, right, of the what and the questions that are the need, as Srinivasa mentioned, to help us determine the what and where. And so I want to thank you, Cadence, working with you behind the scenes. I understand your passion towards this and helping the community. To your colleagues who are with you again today. We look forward to engaging with you again in June and taking all of the comments from today to make sure that we have thoughtful connection with community members in our next engagement in June.
Yeah. Thank you, Erica. This honestly, it wasn't what we planned, but that's perfect because it's what we needed to talk about. And so honestly, I hope that June is the same. I mean, I hope you like what we say better in June, but I do think that this is exactly what we needed to hear. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, if you all will move to the next slide, I'm going to take the liberty. Yes, we can move to the next slide. And move us forward in our agenda. I think maybe this current activities in Albina could be a part of our June discussion. I'm going to move us forward to our next agenda item, which is an update on the OTC resolution work plan, and shift into this important discussion, as today is a milestone for that OTC direction. And so with that, I'm going to open up the floor to Megan. I believe we also have Wenta and JT and Mr. Modica, who has been a part of that conversation. And so Megan, can I have you jump in to lead us, and I'll help us through the conversation.
Sure, I can go ahead and start, and definitely look forward to comments from our partners that helped us put this together. But wanted to make sure that we had an update for the HAAB on the resolution that the OTC passed on March 14th. So this resolution was really for the ODOT and Albina Vision Trust partnership, really to focus on a couple key items. The first is to create a work plan that ODOT and AVT were creating together, really to explore options for highway cover governance and future ownership of surplus lands associated with the project. And so we are pleased to report that that work plan is being finalized as of today. We had great work sessions to get there. Really want to thank the strong partnership and positive collaboration with Albina Vision Trust, as well as thanking our Historic Albina Advisory Board representative, Mr. Kevin Modica, along with Felicia Tripp-Folsom, who was part of the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. They participated in workshops with us, along with participation from Prosper Portland, to put together a work plan. So I will provide a quick overview of kind of what those work plan phases and key tasks are in just a minute, because I want to acknowledge the other two pieces of what the resolution really directs us to do. And this is in your handout as well that you received in the meeting packet before, but want to call attention to the fact that the resolution really identified a gap in regulatory process and kind of legal procedures, and our goal of achieving, restorative justice for historic Albina community as part of the project. And so an intention with the resolution was really to direct ODOT to partner with Albina Vision Trust and help to collaboratively determine what are the laws, what are those regulations, and what changes would be needed to provide Albina Vision Trust with future rights to the highway cover leases, as well as future ownership and surplus land rights. And so directing ODOT to also work in partnership with Albina Vision Trust towards what those changes would need to be. And then the other piece of the resolution is the OTC directed ODOT and AVT to work together to determine if AVT can have access to the rights, again, to those leases or easements on the highway cover, or ownership and development rights of the surplus properties. So really exploring the opportunities around that. So that's the what we've been directed to do and what the work plan is addressing. I do want to reiterate that while the objectives of the resolution there are clear, that the OTC resolution does not convey ownership, nor does it convey the development rights to Albina Vision Trust, nor to any entity. It's not a legally binding document, and we're definitely going to have to take on any sort of separate agreements that would take on disposition of the property. So just want to sort of name where the why and where we are in the process. As it relates to the work plan itself, it's broken up into 3 key phases. The first, think of it as a kickoff process. So we're calling it planning and initiation. But that's where the entities will be coming together for a kickoff meeting and working to define kind of our intended roles in the process. So that includes ODOT, Albina Vision Trust, kind of as the partners, the key partners directed to focus on the work plan, as well as other partners that would have either regulatory involvement in or community involvement in the highway cover. The second phase is focusing on research, and we're really bifurcating the research to be on-cover research and off-cover research, knowing that there's sort of two different and simultaneous kind of scenarios that we're looking at there. So doing taking on a legal and regulatory framework analysis, so understanding what's the current like lay of the law, and then also looking at a comparative analysis for other case studies or other highway cover examples for what agreements do they have in place, what leases do they have in place, and how can we learn from those? And then also building from some of the Echo Northwest work, looking at what are some of the on-cover developability opportunities and doing an analysis there with case studies. The third phase and final phase is really the implementation thereof. So identifying what are necessary regulatory or legal changes, and then making sure that we develop the partnerships and a joint strategy for taking those on. So that's kind of a high level overview of process and the what. I will pause there because our partners were heavily involved in creating this and want to give Albina Vision Trust and Mr. Modica a chance to share their update on the process as well. So maybe Winta, go to you first.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So in addition to the work plan elements that Megan just summarized, we had a number of discussions, Mr. Modica, Erica, Felicia, JT, and myself around the communication and community engagement in this next phase. So we will expect to have this to incorporate into the work plan, a check-in at each HAAB meeting about the progress of the work. Once we have the COAX schedule, we will do the same, but we also recognize that these forums don't allow for sort of more meaningful discussions that are dialogue instead of, sort of one-sided presentations with feedback. So we're also thinking about other ways for us to communicate and to have the conversations that folks really want to have throughout the process. So I'm sure we'll share more about that as it comes together, but I just want to share tonight that it's been a topic of a lot of conversation, especially in our smaller group, as we have worked on the what, that the how is just as important. And then to Megan's last point, as the work plan unfolds, the work that Echo is doing is starting, and at a certain point, the reconnecting communities work with the broader community engagement will kick off as well. So we're trying to be mindful to make sure that there's a clear process and that each stage of work is feeding into the next. So we're having one conversation about all project elements, even if there are several different processes sort of coming together.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Give an opportunity if Mr. Modica or if Amy had any thoughts in regards to the work plan process.
Yeah, I'll be very short and specific. One is I'm so excited about the ability for us to come up with a communication strategy so that we can make clear and articulate to our different communities, and also for the leadership wisdom that is not at this table physically, but needs to know and needs to be as well co-ambassadors of what exactly the resolution is going to involve, as well as developing a information that is that keeps a lot of fidelity to what it is that we want to achieve by communicating out just exactly what is happening, how it's happening, what the resolution is, what type of regulatory changes need to be done, who's leading that work. And so that's it from my perspective. And, if there's questions, I know that I'm willing to answer any with regard to where we are in this process.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. I see your hand, Mr. Posey. Amy, I'm going to shift to you if you had any thoughts or input, and then I'll go to Mr. Posey.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I echo what folks have been saying. I appreciate very much for being included in that discussion as the work plan is coming together and thinking through not only the roles for ODOT and AVT, but as well as the city, knowing that this is a dynamic partnership. I also want to just fully acknowledge there are a lot of different processes happening right now with a lot of different places and things and decisions that are being made. And so as much as we all can do to stay at the table and continue to coordinate those and have that communication, I think we'll be better for it. So thank you.
Indeed. Mr. Posey, thank you, Amy. Mr. Posey?
Yeah. Hey, I don't want to sound like I'm crazy or anything like that, but I didn't think I would ever be saying this, but I'm just wondering whether or not in terms of you all's thought process, are you thinking outside of the box? And I'm thinking specifically about restorative justice and how this community, today in Portland, we have more cannabis shops than we have 7-Elevens, and how the cannabis industry has destroyed the life of Black people I can't remember how far back we've gone back. And so the intersection between what's hurt us and how we use those same vehicles to restore us is what I'm talking about, the intersection. You all might think I'm crazy, but maybe we ought to have a used regional cannabis dispensary on top of them caps. And I know you think I'm crazy. I never thought I'd be saying stuff like this, but we got to figure out a way to use the processes that's worked against us in the past to work for us going forward. And so I'm thinking that whatever vehicles, the intersection between some of these things, it's almost as if ODOT doesn't understand what's going on over there in the liquor and cannabis industry, and whether that intersection is something that we need to be looking at. So anyway, I'm saying that to tell you all that I'm thinking not in traditional terms. I'm thinking about how we can make ourselves whole and well again. So give that a thought. I know it sounds crazy, but give it a thought.
Thank you. Yes, I see Joy's comment. I know that there had been a question about that prior, and that the team has taken a look in regards to that. So we'll make sure that we do some updates. JT, did you have anything that you wanted to contribute? Were there any additional questions or comments in regards to the resolution? I know it was a lot of work in a short period of time, but that is the work to do the work now as we dive into kind of that research phase and those three things. You all should have received the handout in your email earlier today that kind of outlines the phases. So there's a number of processes and work that has to take place. The work plan is just the beginning of the work that is taking us to the next space. JT, I'll open if you had any additional comments or if there are other HAAB members who have questions in regards to the resolution.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's not a ton for me to add after what Winter and Mr. Modica have contributed. What I will say is, we did think in this smaller work group, we were struck by the smaller number of HAAB meetings this year, right? There are just significantly fewer opportunities for engagement than there have traditionally been. But we also recognize this is a vitally important phase of the project. So we're excited to be working alongside the HAAB, alongside ODOT, and also alongside the COAG to pull together engagements for HAAB members around some of these really vital questions that continue to come up in our conversations, and necessarily so, from the large scale ones, which is, these types of questions like who will determine who gets the work to build the cover, to develop the cover, all that good stuff, to very basic questions that general members of our community have been asking, like, what does a CDC do? So just know that we're trying to think as comprehensively as possible about how to pull everybody into the process, not just within the context of HAAB meetings, but outside of the context of HAAB meetings as well, so that folks have opportunities to continue making their voices heard and influencing the process and the project in a real and tangible way. So yeah, excited to continue working with y'all, and yeah, excited to be in the moment that we're in. This is a really special moment for our city and for our community in particular. So grateful to be here.
Thank you, JT. Thank you to you, Megan, Winta. I know there's been teams, Mandy and Carly, and those who have diligently worked over the last few weeks to develop the plan. As Winta mentioned, we will continue to be accountable and give you all updates as the research phase and the next phases are being developed, and bring your thoughts into the process as we think about this whole cover use and the work with ECHO. If you'll move to the next slide. Thank you all for being patient. Often there is opportunity for us, and we need to pivot. So thank you for your patience and allowing us to move through what we need to. Next slide. Just going to, you all have been through this process for the last few HAAB meetings, even our meetings with our invited guests. All of your input is helping the A&E team, the technical team, move into 30% design. You all are familiar with these things, but just wanted to update you all that long-term, short-term land use and governance, all of the things that we're even talking about in this work plan. Who benefits? JT just mentioned that all of the discussion of our precedents and your concerns around human health and air quality, et cetera, and the work that we're going to be doing with ECHO Northwest. All of those things have gone into this gumbo pot and helped our technical team get the information that they needed to begin moving forward in 30% design and beyond. So we want to just remind you all that we are being diligent to listen to everything and to acknowledge, to research, and to bring those things back. One of the elements that we did not have an opportunity to dive into in this meeting is the broader context of all of the reinvestment opportunities that are happening in the Albina area. Our colleagues at the city will have an opportunity, we'll bring them back in June to share and overlay all of the additional projects, resources, investments that are taking place. This is an extremely layered project with a lot of moving parts and components. And I think one of you all made the comment, forgive me, I don't recall who it was. There are so many important key components, but sometimes we're moving a little faster than the other foundational components to get us to that place. So we want you to know that we hear you. We're going to make sure that we continue to keep those ideals in the forefront. Mr. Posey, we don't think that you're crazy. We understand your passion for this community and for making sure that we are restored and that we leverage this opportunity to the greatest extent to make sure that the community benefits and has economic advancement, that we take advantage of all the opportunities. So know that we are hearing you. Our team that is supporting Natalie and those behind the scenes are taking diligent notes, and we are taking opportunity to discuss and to bring those things back. We cannot discuss everything in the 2 hours that we have with you when we do have HAAB meetings. So please take advantage of the opportunities to connect one-on-one. I'm happy to relay those conversations, and then we'll be spending some additional time finding ways to broaden the engagement. Thankful to all of you for your thoughtful input and helping us in this really, really important moment. Next slide, please. We want to let you all know that our next meeting will be in June in our kind of standard time frame. So it'll be the second Tuesday from 4 to 6. I will be, as I often do, reaching out to many of you. This was a really important conversation, and I sense that there are additional things that you all want to communicate. So let's have our time together so that I can relay that to leadership team and we can prepare. Sprinna, I see your note in the chat. Wow, we've discussed a lot today. Echo, thank you for your willingness to listen and to pivot. I'm going to ask Dr. Holt if he would join us and help us close out our meeting for this evening.
Great conversations. Erica, just an incredible job keeping things on point and moving. Cadence, thank you for your capacity to pivot. I won't belabor the point. I want to emphasize two things, and that is this is a process that hasn't been done in this manner before. And so in the process, we can anticipate some of these moments where what we anticipated we were going to do or the way it was going to be done has to shift and has to change. The effort is, and I hope it's being demonstrated and everyone's catching it, the effort is to make sure that this is as community informed as possible and as thoughtful as possible, because the win for us is the people we represent. The win for us is the community that's being impacted. The win for us are the people who are going to be behind. We understand that we're planting trees in whose shade we'll never live. And so being very thoughtful, being very responsible, and being very willing to hear one another and not just share what's on your heart and on your mind. That's important. We want to hear that. That's significant, but it's also listening to each other. And so I appreciate the effort to do that. And then you kind of tapped into it, Eric, as we're wrapping up. And JT mentioned it also about the amount of HAAB meetings there are scheduled. And so that means a lot of work outside of the HAAB and making sure that those lines of communication, those efforts that are being made are being communicated. We appreciate the work of AVT and the leadership that they've taken and their commitment to keep the community connected, informed, and engaged. Our efforts is to make sure that we're transparent, that we're accountable, and that we're telling the truth. So with that, thank you for your work. Thank you for your effort. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your investment. Looking forward to what we can accomplish together. Enjoy some sunshine, everybody.
Fantastic. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, and Mr. Edwards, I did. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.